My name is Thomas Lovehart, and I'm a progressive independent challenging the Republican incumbent for Utah House District 71 this November. And I want to do part 2 of the books on my bookshelf, or the books in my library. So I'll start with The Two-Party System That No One Asked For by Robert Lockwood Mills. This book, the title is pretty self-explanatory. It talks about the two-party system, that is Republicans versus Democrats, and how this has sort of changed the political debate to these extremes, where every position essentially falls into one of two parties, and there's no more nuance in our politics. For example, climate change and the environment. How did this become politicized, where it's a position that every Republican has to take the stance that it's a hoax, essentially, and that there is no policy or no platform on the Republican side for people who do care about protecting the wilderness, protecting our air and water. I'm someone who really cares very deeply about preserving the most beautiful parts of what makes Utah, our great outdoors, for the next generation and for generations to come. And a lot of Republicans out here really care about that too, but unfortunately it is not reflected in their party. We have Republicans in the legislature who are trying to constantly sell off our public lands, who are constantly trying to develop our public lands for oil and gas and other mining operations, constantly trying to divert more and more water from recharging the Salt Lake and creating a environmental catastrophe that we're going to have to contend with in our lives, but future generations are absolutely screwed. And on that note, I have Winner Takes All, The Elite Charade of Changing the World by Anand Rihardas. It's super windy out here, but I'm just going to power through. This book is kind of on the same note of the two-party system that nobody asked for, but it talks about the winner takes all system in our electoral college, where you can have a candidate that maybe gets 49% of the vote in a state like Utah, but the candidate who gets that 51% is going to get all of the delegates that the state has. So in 2030, we're probably going to gain one or maybe even two Congress people in the state of Utah, just because we've experienced such massive population growth. And we know that the makeup of every state is not 100% Republican or 100% Democrat, but we have this system where whoever gets the majority of that vote gets all the delegates. So in a state like California, that's something 55 delegates always goes to the Democrat. And in a state like Texas, another 45 delegates or whatever it is always goes to a Republican. There's only two states in the country, Maine and Nebraska, which have a proportional delegate system, where you can even have a third party that maybe got 10% of the votes getting one out of the 10 delegates for that state. So proportional delegate system is something I'm really interested in moving Utah towards. I think that we should lead by example for other states and say, hey, we want proportional delegates in here. We want third parties to be able to actually have representation in national elections for president. And I think anything that challenges the two-party system and erodes its power over our democracy is ultimately better for democracy. And that's one reason that I'm really a strong advocate for ranked choice voting, even though I know it's not always going to benefit the left-leaning candidate. I know that real representation is different in wherever you live, so that if we want the best representation and we want the best candidate to represent our communities in every race, it depends on dismantling the two-party chokehold that we have over the United States. And while we talk about that, this is one book I really enjoyed. It's called What's the Matter with Kansas? This guy is just a really great writer. His name is Thomas Frank. This book is about how Democrats and progressives really lost the right. They kind of gave up on trying to appeal to rural areas, and at the same time Republicans gave up on trying to appeal to urban areas. And so now we have this hyper-partisan divide in our country where all rural areas are red and all urban areas are blue, when really that's because as the opposition party, we gave up on opposing the right wing in these rural states like Kansas, like Ohio. And now we have this, we used to have really strong leftist and progressive parties in those states and a presence in those states that now doesn't exist. And we see that in states where there used to be more of an even makeup or this competition between the two sides, now there's not, and we've seen states drop in terms of health and life expectancy, drop in terms of education attainment level, drop in terms of wealth and home ownership and all these things, because we gave up on fighting for rural America and fighting for middle America. And I think that I'm hoping that we've seen this guy, James Tallarico in Texas, run a very progressive campaign that has gained a lot of support from Republicans and independents as well as Democrats, and I'm hoping that the Democratic Party is willing to reinvest in these rural races. And that's one of the reasons that I'm actually running out here in deep red rural Iron County, Utah, because I know we're not as homogenous as these two-party system makes us out to be or wants to pretend that we are. I know there's a lot of left-leaning people out here. I know there's a lot of independents and unaffiliated voters out here that are not represented by a far-right, almost extremist Republican legislature. And finally, I have David McCullough's, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, The American Spirit. And this is basically just a collection of essays that he wrote that talk about what makes us Americans, what do we care about, what are our principles and values, whether you're on the right or you're on the left, standing for things like democracy, standing for things like independence, standing for things like freedom, liberty, rights, and the separation of powers. This book is really cool for me because it reminds me what the American experiment is. We were one of the first democracies in the world to say, we don't want kings, we want representative government where everybody has a voice, and we're going to separate powers to make sure that no branch ever gains too much control over our democracy. And that idea has persisted for 250 years. We're now at this stage, I think, in American democracy where the executive branch under Donald Trump has gained way too much power, and the Supreme Court has essentially been captured by these far-right Republicans that he installed into office. And our democracy is at real risk of eroding, and the things that we fought for and have implemented for 250 years is now at risk of moving towards authoritarianism, moving towards oligarchy, moving towards plutocracy. And I think that as Americans, whether you're on the right or the left, if you really do believe in the American experiment of freedom and representative democracy and liberty and justice for all, no matter who you are, even if you're the president, then we need to get involved in our democracy and actually fight for what we believe in, because the people that are currently ruling America, that have infiltrated our democracy and subverted it, they do not represent us. They represent the corporate elitist class, they represent the Epstein class, and they want to take everything from us that makes us a free country so they can own everything, while year by year we get less and less and less. And thank you, that pretty much wraps up part 2. I hope you could hear me over the wind.